and IUCN. To celebrate this, we are organizing a series of species-focused panel discussion for the World Species Congress. And the theme of these events are Beyond Talk, Transforming Ideas into Impactful Local Interventions. Who are we? We are from the course Wetland Ecology, Biodiversity and Conservation, which is a 6-month course being given by IUCN SSC Freshwater Conservation Committee and the Fishing Cat Project. For the Fishing Cat Project happens to be the longest running research and conservation project on the fishing cat. And so I am Tiasha. I'm the co-founder of the Fishing Cat Project, as well as the co-founder of this course, Wetland Ecology, Biodiversity and Conservation. Divyanshu, you can introduce yourself.
Yes, hello, my name is Divyanshu Pawar. I am a participant of the course Wetland Ecology, Biodiversity and Conservation. Yeah.
Thanks. And today the spotlight for this particular session is on the Mahseer. And we are all gathered here to contribute to Mahseer conservation in India. And in today's discussion, we hope to answer an important question. How can ecotourism and Mahseer conservation go hand in hand in the Kabini? So without much delay, can we start the discussion? Divyanshu, if you could introduce the panelists and we go on from there. Thanks.
So, hello, everyone. So, our lead panelist for today is Neethi Mahesh. Neethi works in the field of river ecology and conservation. Her work in the Cauvery is spanning nearly a decade, focusing on Mahseer fish as indicator species, which led her to Coorg, where Coorg Wildlife Society actively protects 30 kilometers of the river stretch. A first of its kind radio telemetry study on Mahseer identified riparian corridors as important habitats, subsequently leading to a riparian corridor, a restoration ecology initiative. She is also the founder of a citizens platform called as Our Rivers, Our Life, and is a trustee with the Foundation for Rivers and Ecosystems. Neethi continues to work as on Mahseer Ecology and Movement studies in collaboration with the Wildlife Association of South India. Our next panelist, Ms. Bhavana Dhawan. Bhavana is a PhD research scholar at Wildlife Institute of India, Dehradun. She has completed her undergraduate, postgraduate, and MPhil in zoology from Hindu College, Delhi University. Currently working as an subject matter expert and is primarily interested in riverine ecology and studying fish habitats. Our next panelist, Mr. Naren Srinivasan. Naren is a conservation biologist who currently works with the Wildlife Association of South India, uh, a not-for-profit society based out of Bangalore. His work involves coordinating ecological research and outreach activities in the Cauvery River basin. His main area of interest lies in understanding social and ecological dynamics in freshwater ecosystems. Naren is also a recreational angler and has spent several decades working closely with the angling community in India. Today, he will share his views on how recreational angling as a fun activity can benefit conservation of inland water bodies. And our last panelist, Karthikeyan. Karthikeyan, as fondly known as Karthik, has passionately immersed himself in the world of wildlife for nearly 40 decades, with a primary focus on bird watching and a secondary fascination with butterflies. He is also an enthusiast amateur photographer. His contributions to literature, including co-authoring educational booklets for high school students, such as Ideas for Outdoors Plants, published by WWF India. Additionally, he has authored pocket guides like Discover Avenue Trees and Explore Spiders of India. Karthik has, to his credit, publications in journals and popular articles in newspapers and magazines. Before assuming the role of chief naturalist at jungle lodges and resorts, Karthik dedicated over 13 years to WWF India. His work earned him to Kalzi's Wildlife Conservation Award in March 2013. Karthik's enduring commitment to understanding and preserving nature serves as an inspiration to enthusiasts and conservationists alike. Welcome, everyone, and I think I hand over to Piasa to further.
Thank you, Divyanshu, for the extensive introduction to all the panelists. Could we start with Neethi? Neethi, if you could, because I remember we were having this conversation about exactly how Mahseer could be put into focus in for this World Species Congress, and from that, I learned from you rather that all these ideas are there and how we can kind of work together to implement the same. Could you begin by maybe introducing the Mahseer a little bit, and then what we are expecting to achieve through this discussion, and then we go ahead with connecting to all our other friends and participants in this panel discussion. Neethi, over to you.
Thank you, Tiasa, and thank you, Divyanshu, for providing this platform to discuss a very important species, the humpback markhor, which is endemic to the Cauvery River, and it's found in peninsular India. And has been catching release island. So I'm going to go into the species of Mahseer that you find in peninsular India to begin with. So we have species from the genus Thor. So you have the Thor putri, which is the blue-fin Mahseer, which I'm not going to go into it much, but there's been a lot of controversy surrounding that particular species of Mahseer. And then you have the endemic Thor Ramadevi. You also have the Thor malabaricus, along with a Western Ghats species called different genus. It's the Neolysochylis wienadensis. So these are the four main species of Mahseer that you find in peninsular India. Yeah. So just to give you a brief introduction to the humpback Mahseer, as I mentioned, it belongs to the genus Thor, and they're top predators in the Cauvery River, indicator species, which is why we use them for movement-based studies and spatial ecology studies through using radio telemetry. They're known to be migratory in nature. They're also endemic to the Cauvery River. The population has dwindled due to destructive fishing practices such as dynamiting, poisoning, overnetting, over-harvesting, of course, targeted harvesting, habitat degradation, including riparian corridor degradation, threat from non-native species such as tilapia, African catfish. There's a list of non-native species there, and building of dams that affect the flow rate, and of course the e-flow that obstructs the connectivity and therefore movement for a fish that's migratory in nature. Now, just looking at the IUCN assessment of the humpback Mahseer, it's also known as the Thor Ramadevi. This assessment was carried out based on the catch records generated through the angling-based program that WASI had carried on for over 40 years. That Naren will go into more detail later. I just want to basically touch upon the fact that it's been declared as critically endangered. And this basically used to be the range of the humpback Mahseer. And all of these areas now, of course, are heavily threatened due to anthropogenic activities. I mean, the population is dwindling to an extent that there's hardly any catch of the humpback Mahseer. Just going into looking at the protected area framework, not protected area framework per se, but just looking into what protection measures exist for Mahseer at the moment, or freshwater fish in general. So you basically have community-based fish sanctuaries. These basically exist as a river leach or water body protected by local communities from destructive activities such as fishing, sand mining, water abstraction, and felling of riparian vegetation. These sanctuaries have existed across India for centuries and are managed by one or more local communities with or without partnerships with NGOs or governmental bodies. Given the lack of legal protection in terms of the Indian Wildlife Protection Act here, offered to freshwater fish species, community-based fish sanctuaries are among the most successful models of in situ fresh fish society and Wildlife Association of South India, and These are found along on the river banks from Mahseer fish are revered and worshipped. There's very restrictions for these sort of sanctuaries. Guidelines differ from location to location, and it all depends on the temple priests and the local community. But they also allow people to fish certain times of the year, so that there's no, there are no stringent laws per se, but it's sustainably protected. And then, of course, you have the fisheries department. Indian Fisheries Department of each respective state, they have the power to notify and provide legal protection in the form of a fish sanctuary to any area deemed suitable for conservation of native freshwater fish species, including community sanctuaries, temple sanctuaries, and river stretches that run within protected areas. So Karnataka boasts around 23 fish sanctuaries, and this includes temple sanctuaries to community-based sanctuaries, and of course, stretches that the fisheries department themselves have identified inside and outside protected areas. So to kind of get an understanding of all the fish sanctuaries in India, we've also developed an app. It's called Fish Sanctuaries on our citizens portal called Our River, Our Life. So we want to get a better understanding of what the management guidelines are for every protected sanctuary in India. So we encourage people out there working in this field to kind of contribute towards this initiative so that we can get a solid, so that we can get more, create more robust guidelines for fisheries management in protected areas such as fish sanctuaries. And now moving on. So talking about humpback Mahseer conservation in the Cauvery, there's been two stretches in the Cauvery that's worth mentioning and really critical and vital to the conservation of the humpback Mahseer. One is in Coorg district, where an NGO called Coorg Wildlife Society functions. And again, here it's a catch and release angling based model where people come angling during summertime. And most of the revenue that's generated through this angling activity is pumped back into conservation. The 30 kilometers of that river is monitored using the funds generated through this revenue. And then, of course, you have the fisheries department who give out conservation leases to NGOs such as Coorg Wildlife Society. And other than that, they also have a hatchery in one of the tributaries of the Cauvery. It's called the Harangi Hatchery, part of the Harangi River. So this is where they had the bluefin hatchery program, and now they also have the humpback hatchery program. And of course, one of the most important places that the humpback Mahseer conservation model has been successful, angling-based conservation has been successful, is the Kabini Wildlife Sanctuary. So all these models date back to the 70s. I'm not going to go too much into detail there because they are going to be talking about it. So Wildlife Association of South India is another organization that's basically prevented poaching, converted poachers into angling guides and recruited them to be gillies or angling guides for people who went angling. So again, this was an ecotourism based model where a lot of the revenue that was generated was eventually put back into conservation of the river stretch. So even during non-season times, like non-monsoon times, people were out there camping by the river and protecting the river. So now, coming to the discussion that we're meant to have today. So is this feasible in a place like the Kabini Reservoir, which again is a tributary of the Harangi? So the Kabini is also known as the Kapila River. It's the first interstate tributary of the Cauvery, beginning as small streams from the mountainous Wayanad region. She's joined by the Panamaram River, after which she splits and rejoins to form the famous Kurva Island. So the Kurva Island is also known to host a good population of the humpback Mahseer, but no real assessment has been done so far. And from the Kurva Island, she enters Karnataka, flowing between the Nagarhole National Park and the Bandipur Tiger Reserve. So both the areas that the river flows through is protected area. So this is a place that catch and release angling can't be implemented because there's a ban on the catch and release angling at the moment, implemented by the Karnataka Fisheries Department. Sorry, Karnataka. What was I saying? Not the Fisheries Department, sorry. The Wildlife Forest Department. And then, of course, Yeah. And then there was a dam built in 1974, which of course has affected the population of the humpback mahseer or the Coorg Trustee, where the catch rate has fallen. But sources recently have informed us that there are populations of the humpback mahseer that are present at the mouth of the river, just as the river enters the reservoir. So there's a community of tribals there called the Karupurupas who have been catching the humpback mahseer during the beginning of the monsoon. So this is something that we wanted to look into, and this is something I wanted to discuss because would the catch and release angling model help us make an assessment of the humpback mahseer population? Of course, we don't know how many seasons this is possible over, but what we know from the tribals is that they are found during the first 2 months of the monsoon. And this would additionally act as a tool to monitor the freshwater fish populations in the reservoir. And we're not just talking about native species of fish. We're talking about species of fish like the African catfish, tilapia, which are proliferating in the reservoir at the moment. And the African catfish, in fact, has become an infestation in the reservoir. So these are some of the things that we need to address. And yes. So moving on, I'd like to also kind of bring down board to what's happening in terms of Mahseer ecology, habitat use, and movement in the Himalayas. Only through understanding their ecology better would we be able to protect them in a more effective manner.
Thanks, Neethi. Sorry. Yeah. Thanks, Neethi. So when you mentioned that, so one thing is about the location of this potential ecotourism site. And also when we are moving on to Bhavna specifically, if we could from her learn about the migratory patterns and of these species to understand, how if this is going to be a seasonal sort of an ecotourism initiative. But yeah, so over to you, Bhavna. We would want to learn more from the kind of findings that you have had from your Radio Telemetry studies, especially with relation to species migration and maybe impact of river diversification and dams on them, because these themes might be similar across landscapes, even though there might be small scale differences. Please go ahead, Bhavna.
Thank you so much, Tyasa, and thank you, Divyanshu. I would like to thank Neethi ma'am, who focused on the humpback mahseer. And now I will focus on another species of mahseer, that is the golden mahseer. And if we talk about the distribution of golden mahseer, so it actually extends, its distribution extends from the northwest part from the Indus River, crossing all over the foothills of the Himalayan rivers and covering major part, the major large systems of the Indian continent. I would like to introduce a bit more about the golden mahseer. So basically, it's a flow-loving cyprinid fish that it inhabits cold water and deep rocky pools. It prefers for its habitation, and its distribution has been recorded uh, from the northwest Himalayan part towards the northeast, which extends from the Indus, Ganges, and the Brahmaputra. So the concern related to the golden mahseer that we are actually that's in the current time we are actually coming across, it's the size. Earlier, the size of the mahseer species, the catch was really very big size. So for the golden mahseer, the recorded one is 2.71 meter in length. That was far way back, and the weight was around 54 kgs. But now, due to certain factors, certain human developmental activities and other concerns, the size catch of the mahseer species has been actually reduced a lot. in addition to the population itself, the individual numbers have also been reduced in the last 2 decades. And if we talk about the migration ecology of the golden mahseer, in the literature, it has been mentioned that golden mahseer has a phased migratory nature. So it during the whole time of the year, during the different season, it has a different pattern of moving. Maybe it can move from the main channel towards the upstream, and when they lay eggs and they breed and spawn there, they come back also. So that also makes a complete cycle of their migration. But the major part, that is when adults actually move upstream towards the upper reaches of the Himalayas to breed there and spawn their eggs, it usually happens when the monsoon starts. So when monsoon hits, it triggers, there are certain physicochemical parameters that basically triggers the fish to migrate upstream, so that they can go towards the upper reaches of the smaller channels having different physiochemical properties to breed there and they spawn there. But there are certain factors that Neethi also has mentioned about. We are actually the population decline and the size decline in the mahashi species has been observed. It's due to the overfishing, pollution, the climate change is also the factor, and habitat modification in our areas of the Himalayan part. We have seen sand and boulder mining. It's a big major issue. And like I have focused during my PhD, I focused on the habitat study of the golden mahseer, and I look for the adults also, and also for all the life history stages of the golden mahseer, that what kind of river habitats they preferred during different seasons. So throughout time, it was a major concern that the habitats had been destroyed due to boulder mining and sand mining, and the meso habitats have been totally disturbed for this species. So related to all these declining trends, this species has been enlisted as an endangered category in the IUCN Red List. So next, like in my part of PhD, I have the team of the Wildlife Institute of India have focused to study the movement behavior of golden mahseer. I won't say use the word migration, because our study was a very short-term study, and we have several other things to research in the future time maybe. So I would like to mention here that for the study of the movement of the golden mahseer, we use the radio VHF tags that were around 80 in size. So here in the pictures, you can see that how we are collecting, capture. We caught the golden mahseer individuals. We targeted the adult ones here, and when we tagged the fish also in the dorsal part of the fin area of the golden mahseer, and followed we tracked them on foot in the kind of very Himalayan terrain. It's very rocky, and it's very kind of difficult, you can say. But yeah, we have walked throughout the time to track our individuals movement. So here in the study, we targeted 11 individuals. In the study we studied on 2 river streams, and in the Kosi we tagged 5 individuals, and in Kolu stream, which are both flowing in the Uttarakhand state of India. So in Kolu, we tagged around 6 individuals. So that I mentioned about the structure of the VHF tags we used here. So it was not more than 20 grams in weight. And when we caught the fish, we just put it in the nylon bag and kept in the water itself. And immediately within a time of 2 to 3 minutes, we tagged the fish with the help. Externally, we have tagged the fish towards the close to the dorsal fin area. And it was a short-term study that when the monsoon started in the Himalayas, so in the June 2019 we started, and it continued till October only, because of the factors that the signaling from the tagging got reduced. We retrieved our tags only, the individuals were not there. So that way, we up to the last signal we continued our study. So also simultaneously getting the signals from the movement of the golden mahseer, we also look for the water quality parameters and critical habitats, that what kind of habitat, mesohabitats and microhabitats the individuals were preferring during that study. So coming to my findings, here I would like to mention very clearly about that it was very short-term study, and the maximum recorded distance we observed for the individual in Kosi, it was around 6 kilometers. And I would like to mention here about the similar study. This is kind of a study which happened, we did in India, but similar, it has been earlier done in Bhutan, but the sample size was more than 100 individuals that way, and the recorded distance is quite larger. They have mentioned around 50 kilometers within 48 hours of the timing. So in our study, we come to, with the help, like what kind sample size we were having. The female golden individuals, we observed that they travel longer distance to their suitable breeding ground and spawning grounds than males, and also they established a larger linear home range in those areas. But the males and the larger individuals, they just had a very small home range they have used, but the female and smaller individuals have moved longer distance and they established the broader home ranges there. So for all the individuals, we did like for distance they have moved, and with whether they have moved upstream and downstreams, we have come across that the both upstream and downstream movement have been observed by the individuals that we have tagged. So here, if we see the limitations and future scope of the study that we have done, so yeah, we had the limitation of a time frame, that because we targeted only one season and it lasted up to for only 3 to 4 months only, and we have used radio tags, and it was very hard in using a receiver and going by on foot. We have tracked the individuals. So yeah, but at the same time, it showed a very lot of things that we can think upon for the future plans, that we should have a long-term study when we have consider the species like golden mahseer and other species of mahseer, because each individual, from our finding, each individual showed a different movement pattern and use of home range. So when we plan for a long-term duration plan, and maybe I'll suggest for the satellite telemetry plans, so that we can have a clear idea that what Bhutan people have done and what we have done, so it can be a comparable study for the in the future if we plan for a long-term study for the golden mahseer. So we recently published this paper of the home range, where you can find every detail about the telemetry part we have done, also the habitat preference of the mahseer species, and also that I mentioned, I looked for the different life history stages of golden mahseer itself. So last year we got habitat suitability of golden mahseer young ones also, that what kind of mesohabitats and microhabitats they prefer during different season, because when we have the ecological based data along with us, so it becomes a very easy when we talk about the community ecotourism, and when we have to show that yes, the kind of river microhabitats, how much they're important for the each and every kind life history of golden mahseer, and how it will get affected when we talk about we have to conserve them. So I believe this kind the work we have done had produced some kind of reliable data that people can use it for building up certain strong conservation plans for the conservation of golden mahseer in the Himalayas. And I'm looking forward that uh, the ecotourism plans related to community-based fish sanctuaries, and the ideas of making local people involved. I have seen in my study areas as well that people are trying their best. Uh, like I was working in Kosi, and people like there are so many resorts on the bank of the river Kosi, and like among themselves they are putting a great effort to conserve, not like they are not getting help from the forest department itself or the government side. They're trying to put each and every effort from themselves so that they can conserve the Mahseer species there. So yes, if we look towards connecting people from, because they are the only one who actually know more about that and who are actually there to in for the species itself. So they that's a very great maybe in the field of mine also, maybe we can go for it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bhavna. Yeah. So, Neethi, just specifically coming to you, what do you think we can? Some of the takeaways are can we take away from whatever Bhavna has explained till now? And one question that I had is that still remains the ecotourism location that we are targeting. Do we know if it has Mahseers throughout the year, or is there a seasonal availability in it? Sorry, these are very basic questions, but that's just because I don't know much about the species. Looking forward to learn, Neethi.
From what we know through the local community, it's they're basically found during the monsoon, the beginning of the monsoon. So when the monsoon flood enters the reservoir, that's when most of these fish are caught. And they have a separate name for it. It's called Mirakar, which is very unique actually. It's very different from rest of the local names. A common local name in Karnataka is Bilimino. Here they call them Mirakar. But yes, it's seasonal from what we know. But through catch and release angling, we can actually carry out an assessment through the year to kind of refine that and find out when, to what extent, and how long they're around in that reservoir, or when they're moving in and moving back upriver. That's information we have no baseline data for. So yeah, and coming to Bhavna's talk, thank you, Bhavna. That was really informative, especially with talking about brood, massive brood meso habitats. That's something that can be used for, even in terms of community-based conservation, protecting these sort of areas and involving the local community in monitoring these sort of areas. And also interesting finding that, female fish migrate more than the male fish. That's something that's new. So yes, a lot can be done with that. But as mentioned, we need to study them more and do more comparative studies all across the country.
And the other thing that we were discussing is also how this ecotourism can also be a model for participatory science, and therefore and the tool for bringing that about is angling as a tool for using which probably during when tourists come, etc., or when the community gets involved, how that can be used to augment our knowledge on the Mahseers living here. Is that also something that you were suggesting, Neethi?
Yes, definitely. And I think Nareen is going to elaborate more on that, because that's where all that information is going to come from, through their catch and release angling data and catch records that's been maintained for over 40 years. That's a wealth of knowledge. So yes, Nareen will elaborate on that.
Yeah, exactly. So we will come to Naren now. Naren, if you could explain what is this whole method about, and often when we hear the word angling, we are angling a fish, so there seems to be an element of whether we are ending up harming or hurting the fish. So maybe when we explain the methodology, maybe we could touch upon what we are doing to reduce that injury, so as to speak, if there is any injury at all. Over to you, Naren.
Thank you. Yes, thanks, Divyanshu. I'm just going to share my screen for a sec. Yeah, I hope that's visible. So, I've titled this. I'm just going to dive straight into this because there's a lot to talk about, and we've got 10 minutes. So I'm going to try and touch upon some of the things that you'd mentioned, Tiasa, but also, like Neethi said, this program has been around for a long time, and there's a lot of contributions from individuals. Right, I wouldn't even be able to put a figure on it, put a number on the number of people who've been contributing towards this over the last 50 years. But there is certainly information, usable information that has come out of it. And yes, I've titled this Angling for Conservation because the idea here is to use the recreational angling model for conservation of freshwater habitats, for monitoring of fish, or even for nature education. As Bhavna also mentioned, it's really important to get people interested in river conservation. People know about tigers, people know about leopards, elephants, all of this. We go for safaris and all that. But it's a lot harder to fall in love with underwater aquatic life, right? Because you can't see them. So recreational angling, an activity like that, allows you to interact with the underwater elements, and in that sense gets people interested. So I'll talk a little more about this. Yeah, so most of this work that we have falls under Vasi's citizen science program. So we have a separate department that just works only on this. So let me quickly touch on what recreational angling actually is, right? There may be a few people here who are unaware, but as the name suggests, it's a recreational activity. So just like safaris or hiking or bird watching, it's an activity that's taken up, it's quite a popular activity that's taken up across the globe. It is or was very popular in the West, but now in these countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, Japan, it's becoming an extremely popular activity. And if you look at the industry itself, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's extremely diverse. So essentially, the activity involves catching a fish, right? So you catch a fish, you take a photograph of the fish. A lot of people like to maintain logs or maintain records of all the catches, right? This is for personal reasons. And also some of them, their motivations are to indeed monitor their fishing, their favorite fishing spots, right? So, and as I mentioned, the industry is huge. So there's a wide range of tackle, there's a wide range of rods that you can get, reels, fishing line. It goes absolutely crazy, and eventually anglers fit into certain categories. But one of them is catch and release, where you catch the fish, you record its biometrics, and you release the animal, right? And Tiasa, as you mentioned, there of course I would be naive to deny that there is injury. There is definitely injury, but I will touch on in my last slide. I will touch on how indeed we try and reduce that as much as possible, right? So if you come across an angler on a river, it may look like a person walking by himself, catch a fish, he takes a photo, releases it, or it could be a wonderful group activity, right? Like this photo on the bottom right. You have a father and a son sitting there on a small little island in the middle of the Cauvery. He's got his boat, the angling guide is there, and they're just chatting, right? Now, many a time people don't even catch any fish, right? Because you're generally targeting trophy fish, larger specimens. So sometimes you go weeks on end, months on end, not catching a single fish. But people still come back because of this nature immersion experience that they get, right? And this is kind of what they're going for in the end, memories, right? Memories that last a lifetime. For many of these people on these images here, these memories are burned into their brains, right? And the common factor here, of course, there are two common factors. One is the extremely large Mahseer in these pictures, but the other common factor here is everyone on this on this slide has a smile on their face, right? This is what brings people back. This is what gets the social buy-in to this ecotourism model, if you will. So let's get a little technical now. So there is, like I mentioned in the catch and release program, at least, it is an innate. People generally like to maintain their records, right? So this is a photograph of some of those records from the Cauvery fishing camps between the year 2009 and 2010. Now, this may look like it's come straight out of a schoolboy's bag, but when you look at the information in here, there's some really usable data, right? So date and time of every single catch is recorded. They also record the length and weight of many of the fish. Now, in fishery science, the length to weight ratio tells us a lot about the health of that particular fish population. So as you can imagine, as a fish grows longer or more in length, it would weigh heavier, right? And in the case of Mahseer, this is a linear relationship. Now, any divergence from that will allow or will indicate that there's a change in the population. These are the kind of metrics that's available in these data sets. They also record the exact location where the fish is caught and the name of the angler. So in the event where a scientist like me needs to validate some information, I can always call up that angler and get more information. So this is a quick snapshot into what we learned from the Cauvery, right? This is published by Pinder et al. In 2015. And it's an excerpt of data that's been maintained in the Cauvery, by the Cauvery fishing camp since 1976, right? So 1976 all the way through to 2012. The data you're looking at here is from 1998 to 2012, so about 14, 15 years. Now, the two graphs on the top represent information on the humpback mahseer. There are two species in the Cauvery. One is the humpback mahseer, one is the bluefin mahseer. And the two graphs on top represent data on the humpbacks, and the two graphs at the bottom represent catch data on the bluefin mahseer. Now, if I could just draw your attention to the two graphs on the left, right? Your x-axis represents the number, your subsequent years, so 1998 to 2012. And the y-axis of the vertical axis represents a catch per unit effort, right? So that's the number of fish caught per hour in that particular year, right? So if you study these two graphs, you'll notice that in 2004, that's somewhere in the middle of the x-axis, you'll notice something drastic happening there, right? The number of fish caught per hour in that year crashes, and then it doesn't appear to recover after that. If you look at the graph at the bottom left graph, this is of the bluefin mahseer. At that same time, there appears to be a rise in the bluefin, or the number of bluefin mahseer caught. Now, from ecological terms, this makes sense, right? Because when you have two species living together, they kind of balance each other out in nature. There's an equilibrium. But when there's some sort of event that happens that maybe affects the humpback mahseer population, the bluefin mahseer population then releases. Okay, this is suggestive of something like this. And for anyone working in South India and the Cauvery Basin, you will know that 2004 was an extreme drought year. And we're actually going through a drought year like that right now as well. So we believe that this is what has created this change. Now, if you look at the two graphs on the right-hand side, this represents the weight of these fish caught in these same years, right? And if you look at the humpback mahseer data, there's the area marked with the red line. There appears to be a whole chunk of these smaller size classes that are missing after 2005 to 2006. But if you look at the bluefin mahseer data at the bottom, those juveniles or babies are still there. So this suggests that there's been a recruitment failure in the humpback mahseer. So very simply put, just from these 15, 16 years of data, what are we looking at here? What are we understanding from these four graphs? In 2004, there was a drought year. There was a drop in the humpback mahseer population, the subsequent release of the bluefin mahseers, and eventually this data also points towards a lack of recruitment. Now, of course, like most citizen science programs, this is not an exact science. There are limitations to all of this data, but it certainly provides us with information that we would not have access to if this program did not exist. Quickly on to a second case study. This is something that is ongoing right now at the Shivasamudram Fish Sanctuary. And this is a program that's being conducted by Vasi in collaboration with the Karnataka Fisheries Department. And it's a very similar model where recreational angling is applied, but not just to mahseer, but several other species. And these are some background statistics from this program, just to show you the kind of social buy-in that's there, the kind of involvement that, the number of people that are involved with this program. So 12 years of data, there's approximately, there were about 20 to 25,000 catch reports. That is a card representing the number of fish caught per day. And of course, all of it is not useful. We can only use information that is in somewhat standardized. So in the end, we were able to use around 14,600 catch reports. That accounted for about 21,200 sampling hours. That's a lot, right? There are over 300 people that are involved in this program. Around 20, and they collected information on around 28 species of fish. The data spans 12 years, and this is all from one single lake. Now, as far as I'm aware, there is no other program in the country right now relating to freshwater that is monitoring fish to this degree, right? And another thing to add over here is that all of this comes at zero cost. Not only zero cost, but people are paying to come and buy a fishing license to come and angle here, right? And that revenue then goes into hiring local fishermen for as stewards of these water bodies, right? To patrol these water bodies, not only by anti-poaching, but also talking to people, tourists who may visit these areas. They're talking to them, telling them about what's happening there. They're talking to anglers when they come, teaching them a lot more about freshwater ecology than simply catching fish. So there's a lot of engagement in this with regard to this activity. So what do we get from that? I'm not going to get into detail of this, but what we learned and what we're seeing are definite trends, right? So if you look at all the graphs here in green, with the green spots represent species that have increased over the years. And the ones in red represent species that have actually decreased in number. These are all statistical differences over these 12 years, right? So it is possible. If the question here is, can we monitor fish using recreational angling? My answer to that is absolutely. And this is my final slide, and I think this is an important one. Piasa, you definitely you hit the nail on the head, right? People, some of the first questions that they ask me is, hey, you know what? How do you know you're not injuring the fish? How do you know once you release the fish, how do you know they're even surviving, right? And these are questions that have been answered specifically in the Cauvery Basin, and the Kabini Reservoir, as you know, is a part of the Cauvery Basin. So we're talking about the same fish, we're talking about the same landscape. So, for example, in 2016, there were about 34 fish that were captured in Coorg, and they were all captured with rod and line, and they were put through various reflex tests. So one was to grab the tail, one was to put the fish upside down to see how long they take to right themselves. The other was to see, the other indicator was to see how regular their gill beats are, right? While they're breathing, they're forcing water through the gills. So how regular that movement is. They also collected blood work and tried to estimate the amount of lactic acid buildup in the bloodstream at least, and this is an indication of exhaustion, right? Now, out of these 34 fish, there were 0 mortalities, absolutely no mortalities. But what the authors did conclude was that this reflex impairment is directly associated with air exposure and the length of angling time, right? Now, air exposure comes when it comes to the point of taking that photograph, right? People, they hold the picture, the fish up, they're taking the photograph. Sometimes it can even extend up to a minute. But every second that passes, there is more stress on the animal. So how do we mitigate that? That's where our angling best practices come in. And that's where this gentleman here with his fish, this is the pose that we go for now. The angler and the fish are in the water. So we're trying to reduce that air exposure as much as possible. The second impact was the prolonged angling time. Now, these fish are extremely hard fighters, which is why people come from all over the planet to catch them, right? Many other fish would have 1 or 2 runs, is what we call when the fish pulls against your line. These Mahseer will do 5 or 6 sometimes. And sometimes they use structures like rocks or trees that are underwater to go and hide in, and then that increases your angling time. So the recommendation there, or the angling best practice there, is to use the right tackle. You use a strong line, you use a strong rod so that you can bring that fish in safely and as fast as possible. There was another study with Radio Telemetry. This was in 2019. I believe that again was 34 fish, where they put tags, radio tags on these fish, followed them for about 24 hours. And the lesson learned there was that the larger the fish is, the slower the movement is after release, right? And this is an indicator. So why would it would be a problem if the fish are moving slower after release? For 2 reasons. One is they probably would be feeding a lot less. And 2 is they would be exposed to predation, either from crocodiles or otters or whatever it might be. So the adaptation there, or what we learned from that, is that the larger the fish is, you have to make sure that the fish is revived before releasing them. And how you do that is using the regularity of the gill beats. Right? Another question that often comes up is, you catch a fish, you release it. You catch the same fish again, you release it again. You catch the same fish again, release it again. Right? It's called multiple recapture. Now, this is something that happens often. I myself, as an angler, have caught the same fish over and over again. And one of the studies that was done was also to look at what effect this has on these individual fish. And the conclusion again from the study was there's a very low impact on reflex impairment. However, these multiple recapture events, if they are close to each other, say across a day, maybe within the same day, or across within a week, let's say, there is definitely a cumulative physiological effect on these fish. Then unfortunately, there's no way to prevent this from happening, but it's definitely something that we keep an eye on. Over and above this, again, to mention, all these fish were caught using angling. So all this research was done specifically to answer some of these questions regarding the impact we have on these fish themselves. So I think with that, I think I've concluded that and leave the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Naren. There is a question for you in the chat. I'll just read it out, and then we go ahead with the discussion. So from Arjun Kamdar, he asks, any ideas why the 2004 drought hit the golden mahseer harder than the bluefin? Are there any other ecological or natural history reasons? For example, they are hardier, etc. Or just by chance that bluefins were able to bounce back?
Oh, Arjun, that's a great question. I was looking for the answer to that for many years, and I found it weirdly about 2 years ago in the Moya River, right? So we have a program running with the Karnataka Forest Department where we're trying to see if we can collect a brood stock of these fish. So we went into the Moya, we collected some of these fish, and we had the bluefins and the humpback mahseers in an aquarium together. And of course, after that, it takes some time for them to start feeding. So we started the feeding process. And while doing that, the bluefin were always up to the food first, always. So yes, they are definitely hardier. They're more aggressive. They're more fast. They're much faster. A lot more versatile, these fish. Even when you go angling, you're more likely to catch a bluefin than a humpback in areas where both these fish are abundantly available. So there is no hard proof on this. Of course, these are all anecdotal observations. But certainly, I would just, if I just take my overall cumulative experience on this species, I would definitely say that bluefin mahseer are a lot more robust than humpback mahseer.
Thanks, Naren. So even Arjun says super interesting. Thanks. So
Sure.
So I think it's getting interesting. And now I would like to go to our last panelist, Karthik. Karthik, would you want to come in and share with us two things? One is we already have a model which was there in the past, perhaps, which integrated mahseer with angling and helped tourism. And second is after we have heard about this past experience that you were part of, the second is we're talking about the feasibility of introducing this sort of a tourism to integrate the third element, which is the community. So when it comes to feasibility, given your experience of working in the sector of tourism, what are the things that we need to keep in mind in order to plan? So Karthik, over to you.
Thank you, Tiasa. And thanks to all the previous panelists for some really enlightening presentations. Like I was telling, I'm not a mahseer person. I really know nothing about mahseer, if at all, very, very little. And I guess listening to all the three previous speakers was a lot of learning for me. Where does tourism fit into this whole thing? I guess Naren has spoken about it a bit, so did Neethi. And I think Vasi was sort of pioneering this whole thing. They pioneered angling in the Cauvery from the mid 1990s. And then, of course, somewhere late 1990s, I guess jungle sort of stepped in. And I think in 93, the first fishing camp of jungle started on Bhimeshwari, and subsequently in 1999, I think, at Galibore. Galibore, I think, was those days still the stronghold of Vasi, and they used to do a lot of stuff there. When jungle sort of took over from Vasi, their staff came along with the whole operations. Jungle made sure that Vasi staff were taken over as well, and it was not that they were let loose. And so much so that over the years, we've seen some of the gillies do so well and attracting tourists from across the world, like Naren was saying. And the camps used to be temporary camps, and they used to be booked couple of years in advance. And the tour operator would book the camps couple of years in advance, and complete camps would be booked for the entire fishing season. This brought in a lot of money, and when I say money, it also means money for the gillies and all the other people who are involved in this whole operation, right? It could be housekeeping staff to the guys who would row the coracle, to everybody else and the entire support staff. Uh, so much so that at some point, when it became so popular, some of the gillies that were working with us went on to being on the cover pages of angling magazines. And today you go and talk to them, and I'm sure Naren would agree with me on that. Many of these gillies really are extremely proud of what they've managed to achieve, and they attribute all these things to the Mahseer. I guess bringing in tourism into this whole sphere, I think, is a great example of not killing the goose that lays the golden eggs, and also given the fact that, be it anecdotal or whatever else, partly scientifically proven, like Naren was talking about, Mahseers are in some which ways a lot more hardy than most of the other fish, and they are quite okay to indulge in catch and release angling. And this definitely, without any doubt, I guess, generates immense amount of data, like the ones that Naren showed on the screen, which was first, I think, maintained by Vasi, and then subsequently by jungle lodges when the operations continued with them. The data was very useful, and based on which Naren was able to draw certain uh, conclusions. And I guess this also helps in coming up with better understanding of the fish, which will then lead to drawing up better conservation strategies for the fish itself, and not to forget the huge employment opportunities that can bring in for the people. And though initially the camps were temporary and set up only for the fishing season, eventually these camps were run pretty much through the year, which meant that all these people who were on the rolls of jungle lodges had a year-round employment, and they didn't have to go back to indulging in illegal activities or the wrong way of catching fish and stuff like that. So their income was protected, fish were protected, and in fact, over this entire period that the jungleologist was handling this whole thing, and I think prior to that, Vasi as well, the entire stretch of the river, all the way from Dodmakli to Sangam, were all patrolled by the Vasi staff, by jungleologist staff, and the forest department staff, and which kept poaching levels at an all-time low, if I may say. Now, of course, angling is banned within the protected area, as all of us know. And now we don't have a presence on the river in terms of patrolling the river or anything, but the camps still exist, and the people who were brought on board when angling was at its peak they continue to be on our rolls. And many of the anglers, again, Naren has better interaction with all these guys. Many of the children have gone on to becoming engineers and whatever, and they've really done exceedingly well for themselves in their lives. And all this, I think, largely due to angling. Um, However, talking about angling in a landscape like Kabini has its own challenges. The kind of situations are completely different. Cauvery was a river where you had just one river within flowing through a protected area, and there was some amount of control over it, and there was not much of commercial fishing happening and things like that. However, in a place like Kabini, where there's already some amount of commercial fishing that is happening, you are now trying to introduce sports angling, which we really need to try and figure out how these things can coexist and therefore bring in the important data that we are looking for conservation as well. And also, given the fact that there are two different landscapes in some which ways, one which is the mouth of a dam, while the previous learnings are all from a free flowing river. It would be important for us to also look at the kind of environmental conditions where we are operating. We are going to be experimenting with these activities. And two, also the kind of population that we are looking at. The former example is a situation where we had probably far few people to deal with as compared to the Kabini situation, where we probably have a much larger number of people, a larger society that is probably involved in this whole thing. So, fair amount of study on the ground, trying to understand the willingness of people to be participating in an activity like this would be crucial before we can take this and then take this off from the ground and see how it goes, and eventually see how we can accumulate data which can then probably help in coming up with strategies for angling. Thank you.
Thanks, Karthik. I think there is an agreement here that angling is probably wise use of the fish and has the potential to both contribute to conservation, science, as well as livelihood of people. But there are important questions that you have raised, which is one is, have we thought about how we are going to integrate sports angling into a landscape which is used to commercial angling? And second is, do we know the profile and population of the target stakeholders? So here, Neethi, could you come in and let's discuss around these 2 points, because so you are maybe introduced to the landscape and maybe you would be able to enlighten us on these 2 points. Neethi.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think Karthik touched upon a very important point, is how we're going to approach these communities. And I think we can start that by focusing on just a small community that's there by the mouth of the river, where the river enters the dam, basically, the reservoir. We can start with focusing on that one community and run a pilot initiative or an assessment to see how feasible or how sustainable it is. And also to get the fisheries cooperatives on board. There are multiple fisheries cooperatives from what I understand. So if we have an example of how the system works through this community, maybe they will be willing to adopt this on the side as well. I mean, if it's generating additional revenue or additional income to most of these communities and families, I don't see an issue as to why they wouldn't want to take it up as an additional livelihood activity. And two, of course, is looking at the demographics there. There's a lot of resorts. So how is this going to function? Is the resort going to partner with the fisheries cooperatives, or is the resort going to run this independently? I think that's a very important point we need to think about, because we don't need conflicts there. I think the cooperatives need to be given first priority over the resorts, or there should be some system where the cooperatives and the resorts tie up. So the resorts bring in the tourism, the angling into ecotourism, and the cooperatives basically run the whole activity. And of course, you need NGOs involved as well. So there's multiple stakeholders here. One is the fisheries department, two is the fisheries cooperatives, Three are the resort and landowners all along the reservoir, and then you have the NGOs. The NGOs come in with the capacity building, training, and of course the long-term monitoring work and all of the research. But how we work with the other three stakeholders is very crucial in ensuring that it is successful, or there's some viability to implement it to begin with.
Yeah, if I may add something here, just to continue from what Neethi mentioned. One, yes, it will definitely bring in additional income, but then in a situation like this, it's going to be limited to just a couple of months in a year. That's something that we might want to keep in mind. And two, it's also important for us to, before we kickstart something like this, try and do some amount of sample studies about how much of catch that is happening by way of sport fishing and stuff like that, which will then help in spreading the word, which will then bring people anglers who will come into the landscape to be part of this whole initiative, be it voluntarily or paid or in whatever form. They will probably be able to come in without promising them something. I mean, it will be difficult to entice anglers to come in there and spend their time and money there.
Can I just come in here, Karthik, just to follow up with what you were saying? So that's absolutely right. So it's clear that there are multiple stakeholders and they need to be engaged with. Neethi, I would agree with you that the fisheries cooperatives are probably the first place to start with. So we are trying this at a couple of lakes around Kanakpura, right, where there are fisheries cooperatives on there, and we're trying to implement this angling model. And from what we see so far, they're very receptive to it. So I'm sure you will have a positive response as soon as you engage with them. And the good thing is we have a running model at Shivasamudram where we do training programs. So, if it comes to that, you could also send a group of them over. We can train them up at Shivasamudram. They can observe how the whole thing works and they can go back. Now, a big catch for point is that none of these fish are being taken out, right? So generally, what people are thinking is that there's a commercial activity going on, and then you're plugging in sports angling, and they're going to clash. But there isn't much of a clash. So what these guys are targeting, what the commercial fishermen are targeting, are fish that are about 3 to 4 kg, 5 kg. That's what sells well in the markets, right? What anglers are after are big trophy fish. Now, the big trophy fish are generally left in the lakes. They're not sold in markets. So that is what anglers are coming for, right? And so there's no real clash with regard to the offtake from these fisheries. Sorry, yeah. Karthik, you had another point that you ended with. I wanted to respond to that if I could. Maybe I'll come back later.
Thanks, Naren, for clarifying some of the points. So one thing is the people who engage in commercial fisheries there, do we have any idea of the kind of gears they use? Do they use fishing nets? Do they use, so often in other places we see bamboo baskets to catch fish? So do they use different fishing gears? Is angling also a part of their fishing techniques? Do we have any idea of that particular landscape?
Yeah, so we've done a couple of surveys in that area, in and around the reservoir. A couple of anglers from Vasi who've been going there quite often, and from all their feedback is the commercial guys are using nets because that's what's most lucrative for them. But also the kind of catch that they have there is primarily African catfish, which is an invasive species that basically taken over that entire thing, right? But there are a couple of societies that are releasing some of the carps like Rohu, Katla, Mrigal. These are also carps that attract anglers, right? In the end of the day, anglers are looking for a safe place to go fishing. There are a couple of anglers, and I'm sure they'll agree with me on this point. You have this passion, you have this, you have the tackle, you have all of this, but you don't have a place to go to, a safe place that you can go and go angling. So people are looking for that. If that can be provided, I have no doubt that anglers will definitely go fishing there at that spot.
Right. So per se, angling is not something which is used in that landscape. It's We can introduce it and hope to, and basically we can through our discussion see that it can actually it won't disrupt perhaps the way commercial fishing is done there, but
No, I
perhaps
don't believe so.
function to add, so basically have a conservation function, so as to speak, which is the point that Karthik had raised. That can we see a coexistence of the commercial fisheries with the sports angling, with the with this angling? And the answer, I mean, I think we have collectively arrived to here is yes, there can be coexistence. And over and above that, it actually is a model where the fish is being wisely used, and it's contributing to conservation, it's contributing to science. We are going to know much more about the population dynamics and movement patterns of the species. And third, of course, it's going to augment or supplement local livelihoods. Is this something, is this conclusion something that we agree to?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'd say so,
I
yes.
suppose, yeah.
It would be great if this can be run past jungle lodges, resorts, if it's a possibility at some point. Because maybe we can start from there, because the closest resort to the mouth of the river is jungle lodges, and the community, some of the members that are met from the Kabini River community actually staff of the jungle lodges camp. So they're the ones who actually introduced me to the rest of the community, where I showed them photographs of bluefin Mahseer and humpback Mahseer, and they said there's definitely no bluefin here. They said we've never seen this fish here. They're like, this, yes, we definitely see them, and during the beginning of the monsoon. So all this information actually came from staff of the jungle lodges.
Here I would like to say, I'm asking, why not like we include, scientific institutes, or when we have to introduce toward the species to all the locals, and even we have to start from the generation who is very young. We can collaborate. We can connect with the schools. We can connect with the colleges, running those projects for, knowing the fishing and how to catch the fish properly, because those are the people who are, every day they are looking at the things. Maybe I have seen students who actually caught the fish like was dead. They have found certain injuries on the fish on the river bank. So I'm asking, because you people are have worked a lot over the things to having the scientific institutes or the schools and colleges to work together for the fishing and angling things.
Do you want to respond to that?
Yes, in terms of local knowledge, we have done work with schools in Coorg district, specifically just documenting local knowledge of native species of fish. And of course, they know more than anyone, because they're dependent on it as a source of protein. So they're catching fish every day. They put out small hand lines, or they catch them with gill nets. And so, yes, that is a way to kind of, collect all of that information and, gather knowledge in that sense. Colleges, I think Vasi is doing something with colleges at the moment. With colleges, it's always a challenge because, of course, availability of time because of their coursework. It's not very easy to get college students, but we've kind of recruited them for the restoration ecology project for the Cauvery River. So we partnered with them through an internship program to do long-term monitoring for restoration ecology. So yeah, it is possible.
During my study, actually, I faced this
yeah.
issue, like getting the the logistics and the permission issues for the catch and release, and even having a record of the individuals we are catching and everything. But when we are not working, I was not working with the institute, so it was very difficult. So in making connections to the people and getting to know about the population status of the species there. So that's why having like projects in the colleges and in the institutes maybe give a chance of more kind of things that continuously run there, to have a monitoring program of the individual's catch and everything. That's my question actually.
Naren, do you want to answer that?
Sorry. Yeah, I think permissions in this case, Bhavna, I'm assuming you were working inside a protected area, so that falls under the forest department. So this,
Yeah, both.
I'm not sure
Both.
about the exact location in Kabini that's been selected here. I don't even know if one has been selected, but over here it would fall under the purview of the fisheries department, and how it's managed in the south. They give out these tenders to different societies. So the tender holder, whoever has the tender, has the right to fish over there, whether it's catch and release or whether it's for commercial purposes, etc. I think the key stakeholder here would be those cooperative societies, the fishermen society. But I think what's coming out of this discussion is that this, of course, is a large program, right? It's multifaceted. It's there are so many different stakeholders. So I think what I would suggest as a way to move forward is first to do a feasibility study to see whether it's possible, right? Actually fix a location, because we're basing this all on the angling tourism. Now, for anglers to come, what do they need? They need not just fish to catch. I mean, if an angler doesn't catch fish for a week, I will promise you that you'll still be happy if there's something else to do, right? There's bird watching, there's otters to look at, whatever it might be. Accommodation is another thing, right? Anglers need a place to stay. You need guides, angling guides who can help inexperienced anglers out, right? All these things need to be in place. All the subsidiary businesses, lunch, dinners, all of this kind of stuff. What is accessible for an angler? And then we look at it from the cooperative society's point of view. What do they require from this, right? Is it just the money, or is it more? Do they want to get involved? Do they want to run the show? It could also be just us giving them the capacity to run this entire thing themselves, right? It could be in so many different aspects. So I think that's the first place to start.
Yeah, because tourism is also about providing service to the customer. So in that sense, since we have two organizations, that is Jungle Lodges and Wasi, do you think that this particular site could be something that you would want to take up in the future in collaboration with scientists such as Neethi and Bhavna? Is that a possibility?
Oh yes,
And
absolutely.
also the fact that the community has
Mhm.
to be, the capacity has to be built into the community. Like you said, there needs to be angling guides and stuff like that. Sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt. Please go on.
no, not at all. So one of the Avasi has a whole angling program. It always has, right? And one of their primary goals is to promote recreational angling. So we are definitely always looking for new places to go to. We're looking for new models that would work. We have this one model, like Karthik said, worked in the Cauvery Wildlife Sanctuary because there are only two stakeholders, right? So it was easy to implement. But we're also looking for models in which we can integrate more with these local stakeholders and any local community. It could be a tribal community that's there as well. So we're looking for more models, and yeah, we'll have to explore that space a little more, because I'm sure that each location has its own challenges, and we'll have to design the programs according to each space.
Karthik, would you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to, yeah. Neethi mentioned about jungle lodges, running this whole program through jungle lodges. I don't think I would be able to commit to it at this point of time. I mean, it's too early in the day to commit to anything, but I guess, like Naren said, and like all of us understand, it is important for us to do a feasibility study, maybe have multiple meetings with all the stakeholders, be it the tribal community. It'll be great if they want to run the whole show facilitated by somebody else, or if, of course, guests who are staying in a whole bunch of resorts around could probably be their, target and stuff like that. It can be an add-on activity for people who are staying in some of these places. They go on a safari in the evening. Through the day, they probably are sitting on the river, trying to catch a fish, interacting with the community, and maybe doing birding. And like Naren said, who knows, you might see otters, you might see crocodiles, you might see a whole bunch of other things. And it could probably help people stay in that landscape for a longer period of time, which also means that it's good for everybody because they're spending more money in the landscape. which can then be used for by a whole lot of people. So I guess, I mean, it's too early to say anything. It would be really useful to have all the stakeholders under one roof, and then figure out what exactly we want to do, what each of the stakeholders are looking for, and how they are willing to contribute at the same time, and then chalk out a plan to see how feasible this can be.
Thanks, Karthik. I think there is one thing that we can all agree is that this certainly seems like something that is worth exploring, and therefore, as a starter, that's a good starting point, I would say, from this particular discussion. Any other last comments from any of you? Please feel free to engage. Any last words from you, Neethi?
Not really, but I would love to follow up on this discussion and follow up with Naren and Karthik and Bhavna after the session is over, for sure. I think the first step is to draft out a proposal, basically for a feasibility study. And then I guess we can keep you updated on how it goes from there. So everyone has to come together, basically. So it has to be NGOs, jungle lodges, and we need to think about how we're going to approach all the different stakeholders in that landscape around that reservoir. So that's what needs to be done.
Yeah, I would be happy to collaborate and facilitate whatever that can be done from our end, and look forward to some meaningful interactions there.
I'm sure from the angling side of it, if we're doing this feasibility study, Neethi, if you're writing a proposal on it, you could pitch that to Vasi as well. I'm sure, I mean, we've got a lot of experience with what anglers are looking for. So we can definitely plug in that entire gap. There's no problem there.
Great. That's a very positive note to end the session. Thank you so much, everybody, for giving us your time, giving us the opportunity to host you, and for enlightening us with all the knowledge. Have a great day ahead, and we'll keep in touch, because this is just the starting point. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.